minor things might be indicators that Kim Jong Un's government is at least considering a probability of reform. Having said that, if reforms start, we are going to see waves of enthusiasm, probably, about Pyongyang Spring. My advice will be, don't get overexcited. A reform in North Korea will become dangerously unstable. Kim Jong-il was not paranoid when he was afraid of the reforms. And however, his much younger father probably has no choice. I already made this comparison with surgery. He is essentially in a burning house on the fourth floor. He has no way but to jump. But his survival chances are not very high. And things are made worse by two very important developments. First, over the last couple of years at most, through different sources coming through different angles, through different countries even, I began to hear, and it's not isolated incidents, it's a chain of incidents with different places, different people who are completely unrelated. Each one is not significant, but taken together, I'm talking about probably a couple, maybe less than a couple, more than a dozen incidents. North Koreans are becoming dangerously talkative. In the past, I have always said, there are no dissenters in North Korea. It's suicidal to be talkative. People never talk politics. If they do it in privacy of their home. They never talk to the strangers. They never talk to the foreigners. They usually don't talk at all. And it's not the case anymore. There have been many cases reported where the North Koreans from the low-level elite and intellectuals initiated dangerous talks when they were talking to the foreigners, and were certain that they are not going to be overheard. And they expressed pretty critical opinions about their government. It's very new. So, it seems that people are the gradual spread of information about the outside world is beginning to have some impact. And of course, it's not a good sign for the young leader. Additionally, chance on Hex's perch. I'm not sure, as many people say, it shows instability on the top. Well, maybe, but I'm not sure. I wouldn't bet. But there is one important thing. In the past, there was a peculiarity people seldom realized. Starting from the early 1960s, from roughly 1960, under Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong Un, if you were a high-level official, you were usually relatively secure. Surprisingly, Kim Il-sung and his son seldom killed high-level officials. If a high-level official got in trouble, he almost never should. But there was one case with women, so we can say he or she was likely to be exiled, sent to the countryside, sent to some kind of manual or low-level clerical job. But having spent there a certain period of time, you would be allowed to come back to the capital, and very often you could be restored to your previous position. Like a good example, but by no means the only example, is Choi Wan, head of the general staff in the late 60s. Nobody knows who, but people say miner. I mean miner, in a coal mine, in the early 70s. A mid-ranking civilian official in the mid-70s. A high-level general in the late 70s. A head of the general staff again in the 80s. Very typical situation. So people, unlike say, it was very different from Stalin's Russia, and there are reasons why it's so. People in the position of power used to know that even if they are going to lose their position, they are relatively physically secure. There have been cases when high-level officials were executed. I can think of 3 such cases right now, but they were rather exceptional. So, and if Chance on Heck way or Chance on Heck style purges are going to become a new norm, if Kim Jong Un is going not merely send them to countryside as junior managers, but going to kill them, it also it probably will make them to worry about their own security and start asking questions. So we have potential Of course, as long as this remains, this kind of bloody purchase remain relatively isolated, interests people will hang together because once again they always understand that quarrels by is suicidal. Even if our group win, general stability, South Korean tanks are coming and then South Korean commanders shooting everybody who was a party member. Of course, it's a rubbish nightmare not going to happen, but this is what many of them sincerely believe. Because they know that they would shoot every member of the administration here. And they know how they would treat South Koreans if they won, and they don't expect to be treated different. So they are really terrified by the probability of collapse. And they saw what happened to poor Colonel Gaddafi. As a matter of fact, the only strong man in recent history who believed the American promises and surrendered nuclear weapons. So they knew that was going to happen from the very beginning. So they are so far united, but there are some signs of cracks at the top, and there are serious signs of growing discontent on the bottom, and we see a young man who is probably not stupid, but clearly emotional, capricious, sometimes, very vulnerable to, very ambitious and vulnerable, who is beginning to exercise a highly risky maneuver. So right now, I would say, situation is getting far less stable, far less predictable, and not because the leaders are unpredictable, they're still rational, smart people, but there are so many new factors now. So probably, well, right now it's quiet, and for the time being it's likely to be quiet, but it might hit headlines and our lives in a big way very, very soon. So, it's end and questions.
Now we'd like to open the floor up to questions. I think you can just raise your hand. We won't use the mic. I think we can hear everybody. It's more important.
Yeah, I think that creates more problems. Anyway, yes.
Yes, thank you very much for a very enlightening talk, Professor Lankov. We have to actually introduce ourselves when we do this.
You can.
Yeah, I think it's up to you.
Okay. My name is Mary Claire. I'm currently interning at Seoul National University at the Institute for Peace and Unification. I would like some precision regarding the fact that you mentioned that some North Korean, especially some factories, were earning relatively good salaries up to
Very small number, yes.
Yeah. And I was wondering because that must be very localized, and if you could precise where, especially because probably not.
Musan, a few things. A couple of steel mills in Jong-il and around. Some chemical factories in the same area. Musan mine and some other mines. Usually iron ore and coal production and steel production and some chemical production. Overwhelmingly exported to China. Starting from October.
Thank you. Do you think the increase in productivity, agriculture, and the black market will change the number of people in the prison and other camp systems? Will the changes affect it at all?
Because I think that to increase his chances of survival, I think that reforming North Korea will not be merely unstable. It will remain a very repressive place. So far, the number of people in camp system decreased significantly, from roughly 200,000 in the early 1990s to roughly 100,000 now. When I say so, the human rights activists usually tell me that I'm misleading. They don't argue against the figures, but they say that it creates a misleading impression because most of the missing people simply starved to death. Yes, they did. However, it also indicates that there is not enough replacements. Because back in the 1990s, when the conditions were absolutely terrifying in the prison camps, the number of prisoners remained stable, because it means many people died, many more new people arrived. And now we have declined. And obviously it seems that people are dying in somewhat lesser numbers. So the government has become less repressive. But I believe there are some limits of how far they can go. Because to make sure that the country remains stable, they have to continue with their policy of the state terror. Otherwise, it will be very difficult to control these people. Because they have such, they are living in such an awful situation, and they have such an attractive example, just, in some cases, 100 kilometers away. Second, another slightly related stuff. If we have a reforming North Korea, I would expect the reforming North Korea to remain nuclear. Look at what happened to Gaddafi, and they are not going to go there. Thank you.
I wonder about North Korea's knowledge on market economy. I know that, for example, Ari Koko, the Finnish professor, has been in contact with the leadership previously. I wonder if there is...
Well, without going into excessive details, I can tell that they have invited some experts, sometimes to North Korea. Sometimes these people were contacted outside North Korea, and people whom they trust. And they ask for their opinion about economic reforms and possible changes in the economy it has had. Having said that, the knowledge, well, I would say extremely unsophisticated and naive. Because yes, in terms of the grassroots economy, this small enterprises, this women, middle-aged women who are buying and selling stuff, they know real kind of small-scale capitalist economy better than any graduate of economic departments in the Seoul National University. However, if you go to kind of more sophisticated stuff, I would say it's a big problem. And this is one of the reasons why I think that one of the things which should be done is education about, above all, basic principles of modern economy. Because it's highly dangerous. Because a very good example is the very recent 2009 economic, actually currency reform, which was basically designed to undermine the black market and restore control over inflation. They changed all banknotes and they renominated, essentially crossing two zeros. But then they stated that all employees of the government enterprises, which means technically every employed in North Korea, every single one, will be given an old salary, old amount of money in new banknotes, which were technically officially 100 times more expensive. So, an overnight 10,000% increase in all legal salaries and wages is not exactly a good way to fight inflation. And it seems they don't quite understand it. It seems that for a while they sincerely believe, not everybody, but people who matter. Probably I strongly suspect it was Kim Jong Un's own idea. Probably these people, anyway, these people believe that they can keep situation under control using police measures and so on. So knowledge is lucky, sadly lucky.
In this booklet here, it says that North Korea was to survive the and nuclear blackmail.
Yes.
Could you elaborate?
Well, what is North Korea? If you look at their population size and economy size, the closest analogs are Ghana and Mozambique. These countries don't normally attract much international aid and generally speaking much international attention. So far, North Korean policy was something like that. They keep nukes, they're not going to surrender nukes because they need nuclear weapons for the security reasons above all. But they sometimes, and this is what they're doing right now, once again, they try to make a deal along something like that. They agree to freeze, to halt, never reverse, never surrender, but just freeze for the time being their nuclear programs in exchange for hefty payments. And this is how they made quite good money in the 1990s, when they were receiving 500,000 tons of crude oil, plus they nearly received, they did not, but it was possible, 2 light water reactors free of charge, plus significant aid was coming at that time from from countries which are considered to be their enemies. You will be surprised if you look at the aid statistics. Over the last 20 years, North Korea has received something like 14 million tons of food aid. And guess who were the major providers? South Korea, yes.
US?
China, United States, and Japan. So, 3 countries out of 4 are countries which are usually seen as spoiled countries. And the aid came with very little conditions. and it was never officially explicitly stated, but everybody understood that it was possible only as a part of reward for the North Koreans for freezing their nuclear program. Once they walked away from this agreement, they lost it.
What kind of relationship is there these days between the North Korean and Chinese governments? I've heard, at least on a surface level, they appear to be amicable, but
They hate
within China, they hate each other.
They hate correct.
And how much of that is drawn directly back to the link from, I had recently read that Kim Il-sung, when he was a partisan in Manchuria, the Chinese Communist Party tried to purge.
It did happen, but I would not read too much in the individual points. Well, people who remember, well, people who act because of their psychological trauma and everything, never get that far high. If you are a politician, successful politician, especially if you manage to stay in control for 50 years, successfully ruining your country economy but still remaining in control, it means you are very smart. And it means, well, all your experiences are irrelevant. Politicians, serious politicians, never revenge. Because it's stupid. It's emotional, too human. And you cannot be human to survive in such capacity. Having said that, bad relations are quite understandable. For North Koreans, if they have any ideology at all, the North Korean decision makers might have only one ideology: nationalism. They don't care about Chechnya. Chechnya is this for simple-minded, ignorant, common folks. But they have nationalist ideology, and their major dream is to have in a country which might be poor, after all they are still drinking their Hennessy cognac and driving their Mercedes, but is completely out of everybody's control. And China they see as a potentially controlling force. They remember, not because of revenge, but they remember precedents when China was seriously involved with their domestic politics, and they don't want to have an agreement. On top of that, they understand that China has interest in keeping North Korean state in place, but it should not necessarily be a North Korean state headed by the Communist family. So it's China on the North Korean side. On the Chinese side, North Koreans are very troublesome allies. They have been given so much, but they never say thank you. In most cases, they never even admit the very existence of the Chinese aid. They do things which seriously damage China's foreign policy interests. They keep tensions high, creating for the Americans a good reason or pretext, depends on your point of view, to keep their forces in Northeast Asia. They play dangerous games, risky games with nuclear weapons, something China doesn't want because China doesn't want proliferation. Like any other nuclear power, China doesn't want proliferation. So they don't like it. And of course they are annoyed by the North Korean government's stubborn decision not to reform the country. Even though personally I understand that this is a very smart decision, but most Chinese decision makers don't see it that way. They say, we did it, we are now very successful, we are still in power, why are these people not going to emulate us? So, bad relations. This is smart. But the problem is both sides need one another. North Koreans understand that whatever they do, China will keep supporting them. Because it's better to have this unruly and strange and bizarre people running the northern part of the North Korean peninsula than a pro-Chinese government, a pro-US government of unified Korea and maybe US forces in there. And of course, the Chinese always can exploit the differences between two Korean states, as any sensible great power has always done and will ever do.
Could you talk a little about the younger generation of North Koreans who don't have any loyalty to the previous regime, to Kim Il-sung? And second question, I heard a talk last night by Sokil Park, and he was saying that there are hotspots in North Korea, the change is happening really fast. But he didn't mention what they were. So what do you think?
Yes, talking about first, we have a new generation, and I think the gradual rise of this new generation is likely to be a serious game changer in the long run. People who are in their mid-30s and younger, people who were born after, say, 1980, who did not grow, or maybe it's still, I would say, 30 years old, it's 1985. People who never lived in the controlled Kim Il-sung style school. They did not spend a couple of hours every single day on indoctrination sessions. They never received, with exception of some small privileged people, full rations from the state. From the very young age, they learned that making a living should be done by them, and they don't see the state as an almighty provider of all livelihood, unlike their parents. They are basically treated by the indoctrination system as a great kind of laxity treated, not serious, not that much pressed, and they were watching from relatively young age. They were watching South Korean TV dramas, South Korean movies. They are relatively well aware about Chinese prosperity, and they have some ideas about South Korean prosperity. So these people are going to have very different ideas of how to behave eventually, but not for now. But it's too early. They still are maybe less than half of the total population. Well, maybe quarter at most, even less of the total adult population, and they are not powerful politically. Talking about the hotspots, I would say Pyongyang, first of all, and if you're talking geographically, and major cities near the border, where the smuggling is a very common activity, where they get access to foreign media, where they can watch Chinese TV, often broadcasting South Korean soap operas and so on.
Yeah, I was wondering, I mean, you talked about how North Korea basically holds its antagonists hostage.
Yes.
Right? In the 90s, they could dig a hole in the ground in the shape of a nuclear reprocessing facility, and the U.S. would come in and offer money for them to stop digging this hole. And and there are things that, you know, and North Korea has sort of provoked these situations in order to get some sort of payout, which has obviously helped the regime's stability. But then there are other provocations that aren't solicited by North Korea, like when the United States invaded Iraq in 2003, this unilateral preemptive strike. After decades of denying that they had a nuclear weapons program, North Koreans suddenly were falling all over themselves to announce that they had half a dozen working nuclear warheads. And so you know, every once in a while there are joint operations in South Korea, training exercises between the U.S. military and the South Korean military, and this drives the North Korean leadership into a public frenzy. And
But when they choose to do so.
yeah. But all of this actually seems to help the North Korean regime's stability, because doesn't it prove that there is a real threat outside of North Korea and that the government is necessary?
Yes and no.
Okay.
I know your logic, and I do share your logic, because you basically say, I will be maybe a bit excessive, but you know, Americans are bad, they're aggressive imperialists, and their bad, evil deeds make resistance justified. Not exactly unfounded opinion. Having said that, it's irrelevant, because as one French philosopher said, has God not existed, it had to be invented. So, you see, even if Americans will suddenly become as peace-loving as Sweden, which is probably not a good news, because we don't forget that, well, sometimes Americans are rather tough and nasty cop. But maybe it's better to have a nasty cop than no cop at all. But it's a difficult issue, I really don't know. I'm not just avoiding that, I'm just looking from another point of view. But even they become as peace-loving as Sweden and Norway, North Korea needs an enemy. And Americans will be painted as an enemy. Say, what I usually say, people say, wow, American forces should be withdrawn from North Korea, from South Korea, it will deprive North Koreans of their major ammunition, ideological, propaganda ammunition. Well, withdrawn or not, I don't know. But if they are withdrawn, it will have little, if any, impact on their propaganda. Because 10 Marines guarding the US Embassy will be presented as a mighty US contingent if it's necessary. So, don't relay. Yes, talking about Iraq, it was different. Iraq and Libya was very important things, because it clearly demonstrated especially Libya, that deals are not honored. But not only by the Americans. You know what I thought when I saw 1995, long time ago, almost 20 years ago. I'm so old. Saw the trial of the former South Korean president. I mean, North and Jong-il. These people, especially Jong-il, was probably, well, not exactly nice people, but they were promised personal security, immunity from persecution, as a price reward for their peaceful and bloodless surrender of power. And what did democratic South Korea, the South Korean democratic leftist progressive forces, whose opinion was sort of expressed as long as suspected support them, did they keep the promise? Are they better than guys in the White House? Are the Hungary signal people better in giving promises? No. And this is the reason why. It's one of the things which worries me. If we have a revolution, North Korean government will shoot to kill, and not only government. There is maybe 1 million people. Look, it's in Assad, Syria. Why is Assad surviving? Who is fighting for him? Mercenaries? No. Don't pull my legs. 2 religious minorities, Alawites and Christians, who understand they will have no future in a Sunni-dominated Syria. It's a minority, but they are common, and they know, and they are well organized, and they are smart, exactly because they are privileged. Same situation in Korea. We are going to see about maybe 1 million people who will be fighting for the regime because they will believe, rightly or wrongly, that in case of collapse they will have no future. And my usual advice is promise immediate amnesty for all crimes against humanity committed by the regime. So just to give these people personal security. If you give them, they will be much less likely to fight. But when people ask me honestly, do you believe that the South Korean side was, triumphalist conservatives? We have always said so. And progressives, we never had anything to do with these people. Well, both will be very active in breaking the promises. And some North Korean leaders understand that even if they are promised security, what has happened to many dictators who surrendered power, more or less voluntarily, in exchange of such promises. Or poor Pinochet, yes, he is a butcher. Nonetheless, now if you are a dictator, look at the fate of Pinochet, who believed promises of security. Look at poor Jong-il. Well, he is not exactly poor, again. Nonetheless. Or look at who else? Colonel Gaddafi slaughtered in this huge tube, huge pie. And some members of his family too. I'm sorry. So, but going back to your questions, if the US imperialism does exist, but has not it existed, it will be invented.
So, my name is Simon, I'm from Sweden, by the way.
Oh. But even if the Americans became like you, it's not anyway, yes.
So a follow-up on your question, what's your view upon sort of the best approach or best strategy from the US and South Korea towards North Korea in improving inter-Korean relation? Is it a more a soft line as Kim Dae-jung with the giving aid sort of, or leaning towards a hard line?
Hard line is useless because it's not going to change anything. Soft line, I will quote somebody I will not mention. As somebody said about the North Korean government, these people should be killed. But the best way to kill them is to have them thrown in the portal of seal. I didn't say so, you didn't. They said it was not. So, because of what I say, this is a way to introduce dangerous knowledge about the concept. And also make them somewhat less fearful. And also, if you like paying ransom, it's always good sound from say, you never pay ransom. Well, for most of human history, most people did pay ransom. Sometimes in the form of taxation, to buy security. I see this is the best way. And Kim Jong Un policy was quite good. I did have some problems, especially when they gave money straight to the central government budget. You know, kind of lump sum payment, especially, you know, I want to improve my ratings, it's your $500 million, stage a summit, so my ratings will improve, my party is likely to win next elections, not a good idea. But if you are talking about all kind of cooperation projects,